we first had this conversation, we started this conversation 4 years ago when we started to use the term New Palo Alto. And I think the term is sort of deliberately, I have to say, divisive in that, you know, no comparison is going to be either correct and, you know, I think really it's about provoking a discussion. We're 4 years into that discussion, and I think, you know, as you saw earlier today, Yoram demonstrated how much the ecosystem has advanced just from the perspective of the number of companies, the amount of capital. I'm not going to get into the debate with Mike now, although I am going to take him up on his offer to be our sound guy next time we do an event, because he's got lots of, I know, you got lots of history there. And I think in the last panel, you know, we sort of talked about, are we sort of not being ambitious enough to refer to ourselves as New Palo Alto? I mean, I guess you could ask New York the same question, you know, but we won't kind of get into that. What I wanted to sort of just now take the time to sort of finish up today is to invite Erin Platts onto stage. Erin, as many of you know, you know, has had a pretty interesting few months. You could say that. Erin, for those that don't know, but I think most people do, was the CEO of Silicon Valley Bank UK, now the CEO of HSBC Innovation Bank. Thank you for being with us on the day you unveiled your new brand and identity. And I said this morning at the beginning 2 things. Firstly, that we were going to look back on Q1 of 2023 as the quarter that we started to step out of Silicon Valley's shadow. And I said that for 2 reasons. One, because in Q1 of this year, 2, I think, very fundamental things happened. One, after the Silicon Valley Bank crisis, which started, I think, on a Thursday. I know we started talking on a Thursday evening, afternoon. By Monday morning, SVB UK was the only intact specialist bank for tech and life sciences globally, because unfortunately your colleagues in the US, you know, were still looking at a restructure. And secondly, you know, what had happened is that, you know, not only did we have this organization of 700 specialist bankers who, you know, the ecosystem, not just in the UK, but across Europe and Israel, really came out in support of that weekend. And I've been a customer of a bank for, I think I opened my first bank account, or my dad probably helped me do it in Twickenham when I was about 10 or 11 at Barclays. And, you know, you stay with banks for a long time. I think I've been a First Direct customer for about 30 years now. But you stay with banks for a long time in spite of yourself. And if your bank is not doing well, you don't often, like, fight for it. And, you know, what happened that weekend is that, you know, your clients, the founders that you guys had supported, the investors who you work with, all of your stakeholders that weekend came out to say, like, this is a bank that, you know, we have more than a transactional relationship with, we have a partnership with, we have a relationship with. And I think coming out of that weekend and then, you know, being acquired by HSBC, which, you not only has one of the world's strongest balance sheets, but has 150 years of experience operating with, as we heard a week or two ago, with entrepreneurs and traders in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, in other cities around the region, real entrepreneurs, to be backed by a bank with that balance sheet, with 150 years of experience in Asia, arguably the markets of the future. Thomas, I know you've built a few buildings in Asia, where people have imagination and scale. So, I think it's an incredibly exciting thing today that, we are at this place where actually, arguably the strongest global innovation bank is now based in London. I won't call it New Palo Alto for fear of being heckled by Mike. And then the second thing, which Mike would have noticed in Q1, is that a guy in Mountain View who runs Google said that the best AI company in the world actually was here, and that they were going to run the global AI capabilities for Google. And that was pretty much the first time I've ever heard anyone on the West Coast, Seattle or San Francisco, say that the best engineers, the best developers actually are not in the Bay Area, but are in London or New Palo Alto. So I think we're going to look back a couple of years from now and say, between the HSBC Innovation Bank and our AI capabilities, we're at the beginning of two incredible waves. So I just want to ask you, Erin, as much as you can, tell us what that weekend felt like, and how it feels now, 2 or 3 months in.
Yeah.
And also today, just being able to kind of come out and explain, the future.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much, Saul, and thank you, everyone, for having me today. It is a momentous day, that's for sure. But before we talk about the future, I guess just a few reflections over the past. It's only been 90 days. It feels like a lifetime. But that weekend back in March, and for those of you who know the old SVB business and have worked with us historically, our mission was to make your lives easier. That's why we got started, was to help entrepreneurs, founders, investors scale businesses and remove friction. So the stress and the strain that weekend was for all of you, which we were the cause of, is something that we felt deeply as a team. So personally and professionally, I can say it was, probably the worst weekend of my life. Now, the positive is the two things, really, more than that, but two things to call out was I could not be more thankful and proud of the SVB UK team, how they stepped up. The resilience, the professionalism, the care and empathy was astonishing. But also, just as importantly, all of you, and especially a special thanks to Saul, Robin, Local Globe and Phoenix Court team. The groundswell of support from the community to help to save SVB is really what made it happen. So we worked tirelessly over what was again, pretty horrendous weekend, with two things on our mind. First was, how do we actually get to a spot where we can help our clients again and make sure that on Monday morning, the stress in your lives went away? And the second thing for me as the CEO is, how do I keep as many of my team together? And what's going to be the thing that is deliverable and will give the market confidence? And I'm so thankful that HSBC came in with agility, with conviction, and they were just amazing to work with, and they still are. And Stuart Tate's here with me today, who heads up all the commercial bank for HSBC in the UK. So we love Stuart. Thank you. So then fast forward to today, and a lot has happened in the last 90 days, but to be able to join all of you and launch HSBC Innovation Bank here in the UK just means so much. But it's also, we talked about globalization. We talked about how companies, it's very hard to grow a UK only business in the innovation space. So we need the connectivity across the globe. So in addition to the UK, we also are launching teams in the US, in Israel, in the Nordics, and in Hong Kong to make sure that wherever you need to go, at least those pockets to start with, or those centers of innovation, we're going to be there right alongside you. So again, thank you so much for having me.
Well, I mean, as I said, I think I know that weekend was not as intense for us as it was for you and a number of the companies that we work with. But one of the things that really struck me over the course of that weekend, as I said, wasn't just sort of the groundswell of support, but when it became clear where you guys may end up and where HSBC may come in. The idea actually that the UK, which has real strengths when it comes to an innovation economy, and you've been a big champion of that over the last 10 years, actually had a bank with a balance sheet to support some of the UK's ambitions. And, we heard earlier on today, we had a panel around hard tech, some of the companies that are really going to make a difference in terms of sustainable healthcare systems, the built environment, robotics, things that are hard to fund versus sort of the Silicon Valley mindset that has really kind of grown up on funding software and software as a service. What do you think, firstly, on the issue of kind of what needs to get funded in the next 10, 15 years, this relationship or the acquisition by HSBC brings to you, that maybe you didn't have before?
Yeah, and so I think what we're hoping is now that we've got the best of both, right? We had the innovation focused bank that worked with all life stages and subsectors of the innovation community, but we didn't have all of the tools nor the breadth that everyone needed. And on the Tuesday morning after the acquisition, Noel Quinn came and Ian and Stuart. And the thing I said genuinely was, listen, team, it's been a roller coaster, but our 2030 strategy, what we've been really focused on trying to build, literally just arrived in our laps. And that is all about full transactional banking capabilities. It's about a global platform and being able to do business in multiple geographies with ease. It's having a wealth management and private banking division, which we hear often from our entrepreneurs of needing a partner that really understands the unique ways that entrepreneurs make money or don't from time to time. And then also investment banking, asset management. So all of a sudden we woke up, quite a traumatic way to get there, but our strategy sort of landed in our vision, landed in our lap. So now we're working really, really hard. Again, our whole mission is to support entrepreneurs, founders, investors to grow and scale. And we're not the innovators in the room. All of you are. So our job is to try to make your lives easier, give you tools, give you connectivity where you need it to continue to be successful. Now, one thing that's really important to call out is the combination of the best of both means that we have to continue to stay agile. We have to continue to focus on innovation businesses from a really early stage, have to continue to deploy our balance sheet into these loss-making businesses, because that's what we've always done, and that's what you all expect from us. So that is something in the last 90 days, I'm hoping that our actions speak louder than words, that it's felt very familiar, but now hopefully, again, to your point, with the big balance sheet behind us. And as this market evolves and we look at the breadth of the subsectors that all of you are creating, whether that's deep tech and AI, healthcare, life sciences, sustainability, continued enterprise software and fintech, it's going to need capital. And it's not just equity. So we're really, really hoping to play a role in terms of financing all of your businesses going forward.
Brilliant. So I know you were on a panel this morning with the Chancellor and the Secretary of State from Department of Science, Innovation and Technology. When, I mean, you've been in the UK now for, what, 10 years? 7 to 10 years?
16.
Wow, 16 years.
Time flies when you're having fun.
So you've got obviously the perspective of someone who really knows the UK, who's lived here, who's really invested here, but you've also got the perspective of someone who can be honest with the UK. I kind of almost feel like that because I came here when I was 6, but I've been here for 46 years now with a bit of a hiatus, so maybe it's not easy for me to be as objective as you. But when you look at what can the UK or what can this ecosystem learn from Silicon Valley? Because one of the things about Silicon Valley, as Mike said, I mean, it is kind of still Mecca for startups. That will probably not change anytime in the next 20 to 30 years, but we know that innovation happens everywhere. And this is really kind of a global innovation platform that you guys are building. What 2 questions, what do you feel we can still learn from Silicon Valley now that the name is not Silicon Valley Bank, but it's HSBC Innovation Bank? And 2, what do you feel like as we start to step out of the shadow of Silicon Valley that we can do differently?
So a couple of thoughts on that. So this morning was a really unique opportunity with the Chancellor and the Secretary of State. And I agree with your comments. This is a very unique moment in time. There is a ton of dislocation in the market, not just for financial services and banking innovation businesses, but it's a really difficult market. And I know all of you feel that just as much as we do. But there is a huge openness from both public and private markets to come together and learn and really figure out what do we need to do to make sure that the UK and Europe are the best places to start and scale businesses. And we aren't, it's an imperfect situation. And I think for me, being here for a decade and a half plus, I truly, truly believe that this is an amazing place to be in innovation. And I think the next 10 years have the potential to be our best. To meet that potential, there's a few things I would say on the technical side, and probably a few things on the softer side that we need to continue to focus on. And I listening to some of the other panels today and the discussion this morning, some structural change with respect to unlocking pension funds is a big deal. It's a big deal that we've been talking about for a while, but we're closer than I think we've ever done before. I think finding a way to push the continuum around access to capital. We've done a really good job closing the gap on the early stage. I don't think we're as bad as we say we are at the mid and growth. But we need to find a way to cross that continuum into public markets and at least get the UK in a spot where it's an option, right? Because right now it sadly isn't an option for many innovation businesses to list for various different reasons. And then I think on the softer side, we have so much to be excited about and so much to celebrate that I think continuing to celebrate the good as opposed, in addition to making sure that we keep track of some of the challenges that we're working, and it's lifting one another up. It's making sure that we are, and this is where all of us together can kind of celebrate success of the founders and the friends and the investors that we work in. But the ambition is here. So I think partly it's a matter of time, partly some of it is structural. The cultural stuff may be in pockets, but gosh, the entrepreneurs I meet, their vision is to build a global category leader. It is, and that is the case probably 80+% of the time. So I think maybe we should also think about not perpetuating some of the old days of old that the UK is not ambitious, because we are.
Just to sort of finish up, you being in your time at SVB as an organization, I think you really intuitively understood, and I think partly this was the legacy of SVB growing up in Silicon Valley, around Sand Hill Road in the early days when, it was a community of founders and investors getting together to grow something that, really people weren't paying that much attention to. And 40, 50 years later, here we were where venture capital had backed 7 of the 10 biggest companies in the world, none of whom had it existed before. And I think there was a very profound understanding and engagement with the community. I remember, Stuart talking to me about how deep those roots are within HSBC. You really did an enormous amount for and around the startup community, not just here, but in EMEA and in Israel, but with a real emphasis on diversity. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how you feel? Does that expand? Does that stay the same? Does that change? Because, that always felt like a key ingredient. And, the panel before that Stian was leading talked a lot about the importance of social capital.
Absolutely.
Which is not always something people, associate with a financial institution, but felt part of the DNA of SVB. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, and thanks for pointing that out. And obviously, we're in good company. The work that you do here around convening and enabling, it's something that has been part of our DNA for forever in terms of the old SVB business. When you put smart, intelligent, ambitious people together, great things happen. And you can't always figure out exactly what that will be. But a lot of what we focused on is we know a couple of things. We know how to support businesses as they scale from a banking and lending and financial services perspective. And because so many of you have chosen to work with us, we've got an amazing network, and a network that also spans internationally. Convening people is one of the most fun parts of the job. And that is a role that we love to play and we should be doing more of. And whether that's making sure that we're working alongside all of you to make sure that, underserved or underrepresented founders, investors are finding access and making sure we're elevating opportunities together, or just getting together and crowdsourcing ideas to help solve some of the challenges that you talked about today. We have to continue to do that. And again, I think with now under HSBC Innovation Bank, we've got great resources, right? We've got a huge reach. I think Stuart, I'm going to make up the wrong number here, but how many companies do we bank in the UK alone?
14 million individuals.
It's 14 million individuals and 800,000 companies. And these are amazing businesses and individuals, companies that you want to sell into, companies that are buying your technology and your innovation. So now we've got an opportunity that we never had before in the previous businesses. So how do we put these communities together, again, to be the enabler and convener and make you all successful? So you should expect more. And you should continue to expect to see the investment in terms of making this the most diverse and equitable and inclusive ecosystem, because that's something that's close to our hearts.
Brilliant. Well, listen, I want to say thanks again for, coming in, spending your first day out with us in your new role. I also want to say thanks to, everyone who's come to join us today, all of the panelists. It's 4 years since we started talking about this new imperfect Palo Alto. We'll keep talking about that and keep debating that. And I think, as Georgia said, the new bit is not the next, it's different. There's a lot that we understand about Palo Alto that we really do not want, and we do not want to replicate. It's as much about what is great and what can we build on, and then what is sort of unique, not just to us here, but in the cities and the environments and the neighborhoods connected to us. So we may not ever be able to agree on New Palo Alto. What I hope we can all agree on in the next few years is the new square mile. Because, I'm willing to debate anyone that the old square mile is over and this is the new square mile. Because I think when you look at, as Diane and Steen and others talked about, when you look at not just the intellectual and the human capital and the social capital that is, within a square mile of this place, but the built environment that, people like Thomas sort of bringing new life to, and you look at the universities, that James represented today, and others like UCL and LSE and London Business School, I think you're going to struggle to find another square mile in the world that is as interesting or as valuable 10, 20 years from now, if value is not just how many generative AI models you publish, but like how much value, social and economic, you put out into the world. So thanks, everyone.